So obviously TaylorMade have just launched a new line of products and woods in the Qi35. We will do a deep dive into the tech in it, but ultimately going to give a brief overview of what's changed. But you guys want to know what it actually does performance-wise, or that's what we think anyway. So going to do a comparison between the core model Qi10 and the core model Qi35. So broadly speaking, what's changed, and this won't be a deep dive, this is an overview. So ultimately, the biggest thing that you can see is the fact there's two weights in the bottom. Now, that's something that allows you to dial weight back for more forgiveness and more stability, a little bit more spin, and weight forward for a little bit more ball speed, a little bit lower spin. So that's going to help dial trajectory in. And the other element is it's a very different visual from the top. So, black on one, and what they're calling their kind of chromium carbon composite on the top. So lighter colour, very different visual behind the ball, of which there will be a behind the ball comparison image shortly as well. But ultimately saving weight, it's lighter, stronger, it's all about weight distribution, moving it to optimum positions. So that infinity crown, as on the Qi10, that still retains, but it's almost taken a little bit further. Looking at the bottom of the heads, there's actually, you can see that back weight sits even further back on the Qi35. So it's allowing more weight to be removed from the middle of the club head to the extremes back and front. That really optimizes stability if it's at the back, and then low spin and ball speed if it's at the front. So some fine tunes in terms of overall structure. Yes, slight updates on the face, slight updates on the framing of the head and the stability and the structural integrity. But what does it really mean from a performance point of view? So going to hit some of the Qi10, going to try and maneuver strike point around it a little bit as well, because that would only be a fair test, because that's really what we're trying to compare is how does it perform across face? Out the middle, yes, great, but heel, toe, what are the differentials? How the two clubs compare? So we'll start off with the Qi10, take it through from there. So both heads are the 9-degree standard loft setting, using the shaft that I use to play with. So it's giving the most representative data that we can. So I'm going to do a few hits with each across the face, going to get hopefully a couple out the middle, heel and toe, and then do the same with the Qi35. We'll change weight positions with that as well. And so I'll get the data done and then run you through all the numbers afterwards. Pretty solid. So it felt pretty solid, but a little bit of fade. That was a stronger hit, better contact. So I'm just going to maneuver around, get both heel and toe, and get a variety of contacts, because ultimately that's what most players do in the course of a round of golf. So a very heely one there. So that'll be really interesting. I'm going to go out to the toe side as well and just see, really look at if we're moving across the face, what that does to ball speed and spin and flight. So that's pretty toe side. Okay. And let's just get the one more with that. Maybe let's go a little lower on the face. Okay, so that was very bottomy, centre but bottomy. So let's do the same. We're going to put the Qi35 on. So I've really tried to maneuver strike all around the face there, rather than just trying to get centred contact. I'm going to do the same, try and get a couple in the middle, heel, toe, low, switch over to the 35. So moving into Qi35, we've got heavier weight backs. There's a 3 and a 13 gram as standard in these heads. So we've got the 13 gram at the back, which is for more stability. And we'll start with that position because that more closely resembles the Qi10 where it's got the heavy weight at the back. So we'll start with that and then we'll switch the weight forward and do the same test. So again, try and get a couple fairly middle, toe, heel, low, and get that comparison. Well, that's the low one. That was the one right at the bottom of the face. So, okay. does actually, you can feel it swings differently. And by that I mean with where the weight, where it's a deeper head and there's a little bit more mass at the back, I feel like I've got to collect the head a little bit more. It's quite an interesting change in sensation about the way the club head swings, and that will change again when I move the weight forwards. Something we're noticing with all of the heads now is where something's back weighted in extreme forgiveness, it can actually be a little bit harder to square up. So that also is another aspect where having that interchangeability of the weight can help you dial in the rotation of the club head. And for me, weight forward has always been a little bit easier. So that versatility gives it an extra gear as well. It's pretty solid. There's a couple of fairly centered ones. Let's go heel and toe with this. Let's do heel first. Right out the neck. Okay. Let's go toe side as well. I might a little bit more middle than toe. I'm going to do one more because that was not as far out the toe as the one on the Qi10. So let's go fairer comparison. Okay, that was very toe side. Feel-wise, what's quite an interesting comparison is how stable, having hit this a few times and then going back to the Qi10, is how much of a twist off center I can feel with the Qi10. Particularly toe side, this is a lot more stable feeling. You don't feel that toe strike really kind of drag the head open as much. That reduces the gearing, which actually stabilizes the spin. Which we'll see from the data once I've tested weight forward, but a really solid, stable feeling head for sure, and a notable difference versus the Qi10. So let's switch the weight forward, do the same comparison, then I'll run you through the numbers. So I switched the 13 gram weight from the back to the front. So the 3 in the back, 13 in the front, whereas previously it was 3 in the front, 13 in the back. So do the same batch of tests, take you through the data. So get a couple central. And it swings noticeably differently. So where I alluded to earlier on with the weight back, it felt harder to get squared off. That, for me, the head comes through much more easily. So moving that 10 grams worth front to back, the 10 gram differential, really does make quite a difference to the way the club swings. Something we've seen over the last few years with other brands where they've got front back weight changes, and it just adds to the versatility of the club. Solid-ish, a little above center, but pretty solid. Okay. Let's see if I can get one. Let's go heel and toe contacts. I think I nearly missed that one. That might be a little bit too heel side. You know what, I'm going to see, just for interest, where it says I contacted that, because yes, I think that's a disgusting strike. I'm going to do one slightly less on the heel, because I think I nearly snapped the shaft doing that out the hobble. It's probably a more representative heel strike, that one. Okay. Okay. It's better to strike it a bit heel side rather than pretty much out of there, which is where the previous shot came out of. So I don't think there's a head on the world that would save that strike. Okay, and that's the toe strike. So the only one I need now is just to get that low contact on the face, and then we'll take you through all the data. So let's get one thin. Again, very, very low on the face there. So, right. So that's very much used the whole face. First couple were good contacts, and then we've maneuvered that around take you through the data, look at the variety of data that comes out of those contact points, and get an all-round comparison on strike point variables with the two faces, with the two heads, but also with the Qi35 with the two weight positions as well. So what I'm going to do, just to kind of show where I was hitting different parts of the face, I'm going to have a look on screen now just to display for each setup. So this is Qi35 weight forward, showing the heat map of strike to show, toe fairly centered, heel low. The heat map, broadly speaking, the same with the weight back, and again with the Qi10. So you can see that actually the proportion of strikes in various areas of the face pretty even across. So that shows that it's not just centered strikes, there really is a spread of shots across the face, which I think is important when, when a brand changes a driver over and they're talking about it being better across the face. Well, this is a test showing exactly that. So again, looking at the averages, you see club speed stayed very consistent. So, not the input staying the same each time, angle of attack, 0.2 of a degree variation. So the input of the shots is the same. This is all about how those strike points change the performance, and the weight positions change those performances as well. So if we go into the data, what we can see, what's really very noticeable is on the bottom here, the Qi10, that number, that small number on the bottom is the tolerance on spin. So it's the window. You double that up, it's plus minus. You double that up and that's the range of spin. So you can see here with the Qi10 919, so the low one on the face, when we go into the data very shortly, shows that really flared up. So it exaggerates it a bit, but there's pretty big variable there. Weight back with the Qi35 365, so this is in the more forgiving position on the face. So that's pretty tight considering that range of strikes on the face. And weight forward 479. So at worst, it's pretty much half the dispersion on spin. Now, with the Qi10 in particular, that section of the face, the low heel, was fairly poor from a spin stability point of view. So that certainly is an area where quite clearly it's been improved on. You saw the heat map of the strikes, that is where some of the missed patterns were, and that's where we saw big flare-ups in spin on the Qi10. So that we can see with both positions, that's a really noticeable gain. The other aspect is we look at the tolerance on distance, 14 yards with the Qi10, 7 with the weight back on the Qi35, 10 with the weight forward on the Qi35. So again, consistency, because the spin's better, consistency on yardage is also improved. So if we open up the data and let's sort of go through them in turn, what we can see from the Qi10 is that the ball speed drop off, this is the one that I hit out the heel. Now actually it retained sort of higher out the heel, it retained pretty good spin, but the drop off in ball speed was really quite strong. The one low on the face, similar drop off in ball speed, but then the spin went through the roof. So that low part of the club face, and particularly low heel, really was a weak spot. Now, delivery, very, very neutral. So it's not like I've flipped the face over or done anything like that. It's not a kind of heavily out to in. This is just purely an inefficient part of the face. And that was certainly something this last year or so. I think it was a shame for Qi10 because actually a lot of the other bits of the face, we go kind of the toe side here and mid, upper mid, actually very efficient, very strong on spin. It was long. When it was good for someone, it was really long. But if your miss was in that particular part of the club face, it hurt you pretty badly. So we can see big drop-offs on distance and then a big kick up in spin. So moving up to Qi35, this is where, again, much, much tighter tolerance on spin. That first one was the low one with it. So yes, ball speed dropped down, that efficiency dropped off, but the spin didn't kick up anywhere near as much, nowhere near as much. Really, really quite interesting how little that kicked up. Again, this one was actually out the heel side, so face closure as a result of that heel strike, but again, spin stayed very, very low, but a decent drop off in ball speed. Heel strike, that really allows, I'll use this head to show, as it's coming through, it really kind of kills that side of the face. So you get that twisting of the face, but it takes a lot of speed off. Where the toe's moving the fastest, if you strike the toe, you don't get as much drop off because there's more momentum of the toe. So you retain a bit more ball speed out the toe as well. But again, really, it's quite notable how consistent that performance is. Ball speeds, pretty good. And this is where actually with peak ball speed 156 with the Qi10, same with the Qi35 weight back. but very, very stable there. Spin number really stable, distance very stable. And that's you can feel that when you're hitting it. So for someone who's got a little bit of a strike pattern issue across the face, the third Qi35 weight back is a really good gain over Qi10. Now that's certainly, I mean, the MOI of the head is up over 9,000 with that weight back. So they've gone very, very stable from a performance point of view, without too much of a drop off. We're not really losing a lot of ball speed, which is normally the give up to gain consistency. So looking at the cross face performance there, really quite strong. And it's not a weak flight either, still quite a strong ball flight. And then moving into the weight forward, the one that is unhighlighted, that is the one that I pretty much missed. So you can see if you basically miss it and strike it, contact point on this one for that shot was about there, which is really disgusting from a strike point of view. So there's literally nothing behind it at all. You risk breaking the shaft actually, you strike it that much out the heel. Spin's kicked up a bit, but again, it's not that bad. We were seeing high 3000s, 4000s from a heel strike out the Qi10 the last year or so. But then ball speed has gone through the floor. So the next shot up, that is the one that will then re-hit slightly heel side. So a little less drop off in ball speed, but a really stable spin profile again. So it's that spin stability that we're really seeing from a cross-face performance. Again, out the toe, which was the next shot, it hasn't knuckled. Again, that's something that we've seen historically from TaylorMade products quite a lot over the years, is a toe strike gets the spin really tailing off. Now the LS may be a different animal in that respect, but from the core model here, both weight forward and weight back, very stable for spin, and then low on the face. Again, ball speed drop off, but spin hasn't kicked up that much. So what we can see is, the low spin, 13 launch 2000, 13, 14 launch just over 2000, we're getting about, without the toe strike, we're getting about a couple of 100 revs. 100 revs is a little bit less spin rate from the weight forward, but there's a little less volatility on spin rate in that low spin, actually for me with the weight forward as well. Might be something to do with how I'm not having to fetch the toe around quite as much, but it's the low strike which has suffered a little bit more, a couple of 100 revs more spin rate on a low strike with the weight forward. So that's where you suffer on evidence of this batch of shots, you suffer a little bit more in terms of spin rate low on the face. And across that set of hits, peak ball speed hasn't gone up at all. So it really is quite interesting where the way the club swings is almost the most affected part of it. It's still pretty forgiving. There's a bit more of a drop off in ball speed. If you're looking at the averages, just under 2 miles an hour when you're really kind of playing across the face. So you lose a bit more ball speed. But actually, if your miss is a bit right, it could end up being a little bit easier to square off. So what the Qi35 does with that ability to move mass around just helps you dial it in for the player a little bit more. But there is a significant uplift in a cross-face performance and spin stability with this model. So if that's something that you've suffered with in previous models and generally tend to get a bit of a scatter pattern strike, Qi35 is a very, very good head.